Hey everybody, what is up? My name is Mackenzie.
And I'm Jonathan.
We are husband and wife, and together we are TerreDice Games.
And today we've got a double feature for you, Stonemaier Games' Wingspan, but more importantly, the brand new Oceania expansion featuring the birds of Australia and New Zealand.
Now, it wasn't in the budget, unfortunately, for us to go birding down under, so we instead are in beautiful Central Park going birding. And you know, this is my very first time birding, and I actually really like it, yeah?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And I was looking it up, and actually birding is one of the fastest growing recreational hobbies in North America, so that's pretty cool.
And while we were out here, we stumbled upon an actual group of birders who were looking at a brand new barred owl who showed up in Central Park around November 20th, but totally rare sighting. It was very exciting. People said it was the first time they'd seen an owl ever in Central Park who'd been looking for years. So that was really cool.
Yeah, and we also saw a hawk, and we've only been out here for an hour, so I think we definitely have first time luck as birders, but it's been super fun. Now let's go ahead and finish up the rest of this review inside, because I think somebody is getting a little nervous about his board games being outside in nature. So let's fly on in. And we're back. And in different clothes.
It's a different day.
Yeah, so over the past 5 to 6 years, STEM-powered board games have had a huge boom in the world of board gaming, and this game is absolutely no exception. Designed by Elizabeth Hardgrave, and in recent years it has had 2 expansions at the time of filming, the European expansion and then the Oceania expansion, which just recently came out.
Alright, so we're going to start off with a bit of background on the game because we're really fascinated by it, and then we're going to get into a brief review of the base game. If you're not interested in any of that, you can skip ahead to our Oceania review, which will be at this timestamp down below.
So as I said earlier, this game was designed by Elizabeth Hardgrave, and she is a huge fan of birds. She's a birder herself. Really enjoyed the mechanics of the game. She likes the rolling the dice and just the process of going through a game. But all the themes were like castles and trains and space, and that just didn't interest her that much. So her husband was like, I really wish there was a board game about birding. And like, her mind exploded and she figured out a way to do it. Did I mention Wingspan is her very first board game? Bravo, Elizabeth. So she decided she wanted it to be based on as much science she can. She's not a scientist herself, but so she went to her trusty field guides and started to make the bird cards, and she wanted the mechanics to actually resemble the rules of ecology as much as possible, and that's really what she does throughout the board game. Her goal with the game was to actually bring birders into board gaming and to get board gamers into birding. And if you watch the beginning of this video, that kind of happened to us. We're board gamers, went birding for the first time, and really
It was so much fun. Wingspan is a card-based engine builder with a couple of really interesting mechanics. So you are a birder or an ornithologist or some sort of bird watcher who has a journal, and you're recording the birds that you see out on the field. You also have birds in your hand, and you basically are collecting their food to sort of understand a bit more about the birds and play those birds to your journal. And so over time you start to develop your actions up such that whenever you lay eggs or you gain more food from the bird feeder or you draw new cards, more exciting things happen. The goal of the game is to get the most points. It's a point salad game where you have several ways to get there. So you get points for birds that your birds eat. You get points for animals and critters that your birds eat and food that your birds eat. You also get really interesting points for hidden bonus goals. So we talked recently about bonus goals on this channel. We're a big fan of these hidden goals that sort of change the way you play each time. So they have some really interesting goals where you're trying to get birds that are similar in some of the characteristics and traits that they have. In addition to the hidden goals, there's also a round bonus. There's a round goal each time that every player is vying for, and you'll get placed somewhere on the track. What's really interesting, there's a competitive side, as well as just however many you get, that's how many points you get side as well, which allows it to be both either a competitive game or a sort of passive, just doing your own thing game, which is really cool. The game makes really interesting use of action cubes. So you have these action cubes that you move along. So there's so many different types of actions that can occur as part of the engine building. And so the cubes really help you keep track of where you were and which actions you've already accomplished. And the order in which you accomplish them actually matters a lot too, which I think adds a really interesting aspect to it. So you may have an action at the end of your track that will benefit later actions as you gain some cards that you then need to discard or things like that.
One of the things we really appreciate about a game is a great theme, and Wingspan does not disappoint. I mean, this theme knocks it out of the park. I just grabbed a random bird card to be able to show you. This is the black-bellied whistle duck, and each card has a fact on it. So this one says, these ducks really do whistle. And then it also goes into what environment they live in. So this duck lives in the wetlands.
Another thing that I really like about it is the types of nests that they lay. So there's ground nests, there's platform nests, cavities, bowls, and then there's this like special nest type, which I thought was really interesting. So basically they were able to bucket most birds into those types of nests, but then there were these certain birds that would either make like really special nests or they could use like another bird's nest. And so for those, there's the wild, where you have like the star for what their nest is.
What you do with this card when it becomes active or when you first play it, it usually connects to one of the traits about the bird.
There's the predators who will get food from the food tray if there's a certain type of food they eat there. So you'll see like eagles going for the rodents and things like that.
There is a reason of why you're doing these different actions, which I really appreciate.
Another thing that really draws the eye for Wingspan is the components. So the components are very, very nice. The eggs have a nice feel to them. The whole box finish and the rulebook have this linen finish to it, which I just love that like extra grainy texture to it.
Let's talk about this sexy dice tower. Like, it's a birdhouse. I mean, come on for theme. Okay, yeah, make one go. That is so cute.
So we know why you are all here. If you clicked on this video, you likely knew all of that already. So we are here to talk about the Oceania expansion, which just came out a couple weeks ago. So we got our hands on a copy that was sent to us, and we're gonna tell you about it.
Yeah, so this is based on the birds of Australia and New Zealand, and on the front cover, it is my favorite Australian bird, the kookaburra. It makes that classic sound in like every single jungle movie you hear. Like,
so what is Oceania? How is it different than the base game? So the first thing they give you a bunch of cards, they give you a new food type, the Nectar, and they give you new player boards. So that's the other big change. So I know that when a board game comes out with an expansion, if I really like the base game, I'm pretty likely to get the expansion. Some people like when you like rip up the flooring and you're like putting in a brand new game when you get the expansion, and it really tosses things around. And then there's the other side of it, which is if you're buying an expansion for a game, you likely already really like the base game. And what an expansion can provide is a bit more of the same with a twist. So that's something that I think Wingspan Oceania does particularly well. So you still have a pretty balanced deck. You have a lot of the brown powers, a lot of the when activated. But what I found was interesting was you have some really fun new actions. Like this one, you reset the bird feeder and then you would gain one mice or one rodent if there was one. And then you can give it to another player, and if you do, you get to lay 3 eggs on the bird. So there's like these new combinations where they've started to like combine the laying eggs and gaining food actions. And there's other ones that would also reset the cards that are available in the bird tray, which is really interesting because it's gonna make that tray, I think, trade out a bit more than in the base game. So you have a bit more like optionality into what you're drawing.
The new card that they have added to this game is the end of game action. So what's that gonna do is like it will trigger at the very end of the game, as opposed to the European expansion, which that card is, if you don't know, it is between rounds, there is an activation, but this one is the end of the game.
I really like them because it allowed me, I had like 4 or 5 game end powers that one time, and it allowed me to like do a ton of stuff after the game was already over. So I had no eggs, I had no food, and I was able to like gain enough that one of my game end was to play another bird. And so I actually like gained up enough of the eggs that I needed to then play another bird, and it really drastically affected my score at the end of the round.
Yeah, I was winning, and then I lost.
So let's talk about this new food type, the Nectar. It is the wild food type. So what's really interesting about Nectar, it can be used as your food type for any of the food cost. So let's talk about what makes it really, really interesting though. So in the rulebook, what I love about the rulebook is that it's got this whole section on nectar and why it's important in the food diet. And it talks about how nectar comes from these trees, and it's often an indicator, even if the nectar isn't directly what the bird's going for, it can help them lead towards life, to understand, to know, oh, there's nectar, there's also probably my food here. Now, another thing about nectar that I thought was really interesting was they played on some of the like scarcity of it and talked about how it's sort of this thing that everyone uses. So one of the cool things they did is at the end of every round, you lose any leftover nectar that you have not used. So why would you want the Nectar? Well, there's another added bonus on the brand new player mats, and that's that anytime that you spend Nectar, instead of putting it back into the food tray, you actually track on that land type how much Nectar you have spent. And so the player who spends the most Nectar in each of those land types will get extra points at the end of the game, as well as the second place player for anyone who's placed any Nectar there, similar to how the goals work. So if I have like 6-7 action cubes left, I will absolutely go for the Nectar. So I want that Nectar early in the round. What's cool about Nectar is that on the brand new player mats, we actually have a couple different use cases for Nectar. So I mentioned it's a wild food when it comes to purchasing those birds and putting them on your player mat. But also, you're tracking it in each of these different lands because it can be used as the cost for a couple of these different upgrades. So when you're trying to draw an extra card, you can use the Nectar. You can also use any food type to get more eggs, and that would allow you to use Nectar there as well.
There are new round game goals, and I think they get a little more complicated, a little more complex than the base game. So we have like the bird facing which way, like which in the picture itself, is the beak pointing to the left or is the beak pointing to the right? And you like try and add up those for the round.
What I like about that is they leave some of it up to your imagination too. So like there's this one bird that has like a little bit of a snaggle beak, and it's just like barely like tilted to the left even though they're straight forward, and they're like, yeah, in the book it actually clarifies that as a left facing bird. One of the goals is the food cost, which is really cool. So it says for every occurrence of the rodent or the fish in your food cost, you would add up however many you have of that, and that's how you do the bonus goal there.
And then one of like the coolest ones or craziest ones, like no goal. There'll be like no goal that round, which is kind of like
no goal.
But it can kind of help you, like if you needed to focus on your hidden goals, you kind of focus on that round. Kind of gave you like your mind a little break. So there are new bonus cards in this expansion, and I think they're really cool. So one of them is that you have to line up the birds by wingspan in ascending or descending order in the row. So it would be like in the forest, like line up from ascending or descending by their wingspan across the row, and that is how you get it to a neat one. And then there's also one that I had the other day. It was like have like one of each nest type throughout your board. It doesn't matter like which row or column.
If you got multiple sets, then you would get more points.
So if you got like double, you got like more points in that. So it's a lot of new hidden goals that I think add like a really fun element to the game.
And what I think is so cool about them, we actually talked to Jamie Stegmaier about this in a recent video, but it really changes your strategy, and sometimes it's a good thing or a bad thing. So you really have to choose whether or not you're going to go for those goals and whether it's worth the points to you.
Yeah, the other day I actually lost the game because I did focus on that so much, but I was so proud that I accomplished my hidden goal. I didn't even care that I lost. And then one of the other neat things is that they have added a new egg right there.
One thing that was a little weird about this expansion was that they, first of all, when you open up the box, there's just like not a whole lot of room in the box, so everything like just barely fits in. And they also didn't give you anything to put the bird cards in, or the Nectar, or the eggs. So what we ended up actually doing for ours was we put all the cards back into the blue base container. They all fit in there. And then we put all the eggs in with our other eggs. And then we currently do not have a container for the Nectar, so I stole one from Scythe. The European expansion does come with a bird card tray container, but we were able to fit it all into the base one, so it wasn't a big deal.
So while we were playtesting this game, we playtested it with just Oceania, then we went ahead and combined them together in the North American birds too. Like, did you notice pros and cons?
Yeah, one thing that I think needs to be called out very quickly that is very cool, the bonus cards often have a percent on the bottom. They say like 13% of cards or 22% of cards. Well, when they made the expansion, they kept all the percentages the same. The ratio stayed the same. So you still have 13% of the birds meet that requirement, 22% of the birds. So they somehow managed to like keep the same balance sort of working for everything, which super, super awesome. Like that was really great. I also felt the cards flowed in really nicely. I was really excited when I saw the game end ones. But we had a game where they all came up near the beginning. I totally forgoed them. I did not want to play a bunch of game end cards at the beginning because they were not going to benefit my engine building. And then I actually didn't see any the rest of the game. So it can really also depend sort of on your luck on when those cards show up. But the other Oceania cards, plenty of them made it onto my mat. There's a lot of brand new really cool engine building ones with the brown powers, and then just with like sort of the white ones, some of the ones that would allow you to play another bird. There's even like the cassowary, I think, is the one that like will eat a bird on your board mat and like kill one of your birds.
Subtle killing. Place the bird card underneath that card. I'm like, did he just die? Did you feel with the Nectar, with the North American bird cards, did you feel like it helped you at all? Did you feel like you kind of ignored it?
Only a few of the birds actually require Nectar to be placed. So there's a few that actually have the Nectar symbol. Otherwise, it's just a wild. So it can be really helpful for playing any of your birds.
We would definitely recommend this game to anybody who loves Wingspan. I mean, like, if you love Wingspan, then you're gonna love this expansion.
So you don't really have a whole lot of new rules to learn, but you get a lot from the Nectar and the new boards and everything.
But as far as like a couple game or as a 2-player game, I think this game is fantastic for 2 players. Like, it's very peaceful. It's like playing birds. Like, it's like a really like soft, calming, like date night game. Like it,
Yes.
So like for that, like you just don't feel stressed out. I think it's a very relaxing game.
Yeah, and it's a game where you're kind of in your own world. So you're building your tableau, you're building your engine in front of you, and you don't really have to worry about what the other player is doing. You can even have that peaceful side where it's like you're not competing to have the most, you're just trying to get a certain number. So everybody wins. Alright, so the Wingspan Automa, the solo experience. I'm going to talk about just in general the Wingspan Automa, and then a couple of the things that they added for Oceania that are really, really cool. I think that they've integrated it so well to the base game. So let's just talk about that experience. Wingspan especially caters to a solo mode because it's already a game where you're in your own space, you're doing your own thing, building your own tableau. And what the Automa gives you is it gives you something to fight for. It gives you, you know, where you would normally be just trying to get a point score, it really gives you a number to see like, oh, I need to get more of this type of bird right now. And it really changes the environment around you. Solo games in general feel a bit to me like a puzzle. I feel like I'm trying to solve for this, you know, I know the score that I'm going for, and I see that goal, and I try to reach it, and I usually lose the first time I play solo. But coming around the second time, I usually have a bit better idea on how to counter the solo player and how to play in a way that will cause me to beat them. And so with the Automa, one of my favorite things about the Wingspan Automa is that those goalposts are moving, and I think in a way that is a bit more predictable, but also unpredictable in the same way. So in a lot of solo games, you know that they've got a score and you see it going up over time. But my favorite thing about the Wingspan Automa is how it interacts with the end of round goals. So at the end of each round, you have a number that you're trying to go for. So you know that I'm trying to get more of a certain bird facing a certain way than the other player, or any of those round goals that we talked about. With the Automa, for each of the rounds, 1, 2, 3, 4, they'll start to get increasing difficulty of what their base score is for that round goal. And then throughout the game, what's really cool is when they're playing their cards, which get laid onto this sort of like round mapping that tells you what happens that round, there's a chance that they will get more or less points for that game goal. So over time, they had a base score of 4, they now have 5, they now have 6, they now have 5 again. And so there's sort of this like ebb and flow of that, which I think is really fun because it forces me to be like, oh, I got another one, I got to go for it. Another piece of that was the Nectar. They did the same thing with the Nectar in a really cool way. So they have this really nice, gorgeous looking card where they have their base Nectar value for each of the land types. And then throughout the game, basically at the end of each round, they'll get to like store some more Nectar on that card. So what I appreciate by being end of round is that you don't have more moving pieces during the game. You can continue to just enjoy your experience. But then you have that little cleanup step of these little 2 cards you draw at the end of each round where you add or subtract from that Nectar score. So again, that's just another thing that I'm fighting for and another thing that I can sort of measure, but it doesn't take up a whole lot of extra brain power. One of the things that I really like about the Automa that I saw with Oceania is that they provide this Automarazzi version where you can actually play with the Automa and multiple players. So with 2 to 4 players, you can also have the Automa, and it's got some additional rules for how it interacts with the players, and it's also got this like hoarder where it can like hoard food types and stuff like that. But my experience, I played it the first time, I just got like destroyed, and I played it again and won by a single point. So I consider that a great victory. Very excited about that.
All right, everyone, and that is our review of Wingspan and the brand new expansion Oceania, which is now available to buy. Thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure to tune in next week where we're going to be doing an exclusive Christmas bonus video where we are going to be doing a giveaway. Woohoo! Our first giveaway! Isn't that exciting? Yeah. All right, thank you guys. guys so much, and I hope you enjoy Oceania. Happy playing!